Welcome to another week, another show of Hawkeye with me, Dave O'Hara. There you see our buddy Mitch Fick on the screen. We'll get to Mitch here in just a moment. It is Wednesday afternoon as we record this, March 20th. A lot happening on the campus of the University of Iowa with our Iowa Hawkeyes. Mitch will join us for the first two segments, talking Bluters Bunch, Iowa Hawkeye women's basketball, and also Hawkeye football. Hope springs eternal. Today was the first day of spring drills for the University of Iowa football team, but big news yesterday. And so that's why I always timestamp this show when we record it, because so much happens. And yesterday was one of those days for certain. Also yesterday, which will be our third segment today, Michael Merrick, my production partner and Iowa Hawkeye sports broadcaster, will join me to close out the show and talk Hawkeye men's basketball and the NIT last night. Big game. So that being said, I'd like to welcome and say thank you to our buddy Mitch Fick. Mitch, of course, is the main news anchor at Iowa's News Now, Fox 28 and KGEN, CBS2. They, of course, carry my program along with the other Sinclair-owned and operated stations in the state of Iowa. Mitch, also check out the Eye on the Hawks podcast as he co-hosts that, and great coverage from Iowa's News Now with all things Iowa Hawkeyes sports. So, Mitch, as always, thanks for joining us. And what a time to be a Hawkeye fan and to cover the Hawkeyes. Let's stick to Bluters Bunch first, and then we'll get to the football program in the second segment. Mitch, how's everything going with you, my friend?
Hawkeyes are the second number one seed in the NCAA tournament, and you get to have two more games with this bunch at Carver Hawkeye Arena on Saturday, and then hopefully you get that second game Monday. We don't want to count the chickens before they hatch, but yeah, I mean, you said it. Just what a super fun time. And, you know, we record this Wednesday. Wright Thompson just came out with an incredible piece on ESPN today, and anybody who knows Wright Thompson's work knows he is sports journalism and storytelling at its finest, and his piece on Kadyn Clark, I think, really just accentuates and lifts up the excitement of this week when you fully get that look back at what this journey has been like for Kadyn and this Hawkeye team and everything they've accomplished and are still looking ahead to. Yeah, this is the time of year where you really get excited.
What a team effort it is becoming. Fulcher being on that all-tournament team along with Kadyn Clark, obviously. But Fulcher, what minutes she is putting in for the injured Molly Davis, Mitch?
As important a player as you could have asked for in Minneapolis, with Molly being out and sounding like she'll probably still miss these first two-round games. Lisa told us on Sunday that, you know, she's still limping, not as far along as they were hoping. But again, when we all saw her crumble to the ground on senior day at Carver, we thought the season was over. So the fact that we're still playing with house money a little bit when it comes to Molly Davis's health is certainly a welcome news. So we hope that she keeps resting up. But yeah, what Sydney did, and really everybody, particularly in that championship game, I mean, Kadyn started 0 for 10 from three, and you would think that'd be nails in the coffin all over. But as we are perpetually reminded by this team, they are certainly led by a transcendent superstar in Kadyn Clark, but they are far from a one-woman show. And you just see it time and time again. And I think that's why, you know, as Kate and Kadyn smirked at each other as that bracket was being revealed at Carver Hawkeye on Sunday, of just all the other teams in that bracket, and ESPN referring to it as a murderer's row. Guess what? Iowa's still the top-ranked team in that bracket. And so maybe this is less of a reaction from fans of, boy, you know, Iowa's stuck in there with all those teams. All those teams are stuck in there with Iowa.
But let's look at the reality of the situation moving forward as we talk about when you have a team like this. So everybody, you know, as you mentioned, and ESPN did a murderer's row of a bracket the Bluters Bunch has. But Mitch, you know, I thought a couple of key points were made in the analysis after the brackets were released, which is, yeah, Iowa has to adjust to some big teams, and UCLA's got a 6'7" girl, and there's a lot of other things before that can happen before they even get to South Carolina, who again has a 6'7" post player. But Mitch, they have to adjust to Iowa, and I thought that key point was made multiple times on Sunday by the analysts on ESPN, which is, hey, yeah, you're right. They have either Hannah Stuelke or Addison O'Grady, and they can rotate in and out, 10 fouls in the post position. But Mitch, then those teams have to keep up with the Hawkeyes run and gun. And if they're even remotely accurate in a game, as Nebraska saw, it can happen quickly. And isn't it amazing, Mitch? By the time the Hawks play, it will be almost 2 weeks since they won that game in overtime against Nebraska at the Big Ten Championship. So as quickly as we say, man, we didn't get a chance to relish and enjoy that, we've had almost 13 days by the time we tip off on Saturday. So, but I wanted to make that point with you. I think it's going to be interesting to see how other teams can adapt to Iowa.
Yeah, I think it was really on display in that Big Ten title game against Nebraska, is that when it comes to Iowa's front court and their perimeter shooting, the only ones that are really going to stop them are themselves.
Yeah.
It's going to be going cold because That's how LSU pulled off a win in the national title. I shouldn't say pulled off. They're one of the best teams in the country. They more than earned that victory, but it was acknowledging and accepting Caitlin Clark's going to get her buckets. We've got to win in the post, and we've got to defend everywhere inside the 3-point line. And so I was going to get their buckets, and the only way I think they're going to struggle with that is if they have a cold night shooting. And again, we were reminded they're down 8 with 2.5 to play against Nebraska. When they hit that switch, they are really, really tough to stop no matter what the deficit is.
And you put a great series out there, Mitch, you and I would do now. The Caitlin Clark effect. Folks, you got to go online. All the information you see at Mitch's bottom of the screen, you've got to check out that special besides his Eye on Hawks podcast. Mitch, fantastic work on the Caitlin Clark effect. Let's talk about that as we talk about the national landscape.
Yeah, and all credit goes to our assistant news director, Mike Howell, who has put the skeleton together, not just on that, but on the pregame show we had ahead of Senior Day on Fox with that Ohio State game. He's just done a tremendous job. And Owen Sebring has just been capturing every moment about as beautifully as you could, for everything from the Michigan game where she broke the record, Lynette Woodard's record, or the NCAA record, I should say. He's just captured everything great. But yeah, we said this in Dallas after the loss to LSU. The consolation prize there was that, well, you don't have the trophy, but you have changed the way people consume the sport through television and streaming in this country. And it doesn't go in a trophy case, but I could argue it has a heck of a lot more impact and lasting effect. It's the way she's done it, and the stories that we've learned along the way about the rest of her teammates and her herself. She's a 22-year-old kid. These are all just kids, and they have, particularly her, the weight of the world and the weight of a sport on their shoulders. And they've somehow, some way, just been able to be themselves and keep their heads up and keep smiling and keep having fun. And we always get into these debates of, well, does she need to win a championship to cement her legacy, or who's better? We worry so much. I think just in the conversation about competition, we almost get competitive in that of trying to figure out who's the greatest. I don't really care who the greatest is because that's so subjective. What I care about is, are we watching greatness? And unequivocally, we are watching greatness every time that girl from West Des Moines Dowling stepping onto the floor. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And we get a few more games of it and a couple more in Iowa City this weekend. And we just embrace the moment. That's all you can do.
Folks, there he is, Mitch Fick. He's the main news anchor at Iowa's News Now and Fox 28 and CBS2, but also a sports guy through and through with his Eye on the Hawks podcast. He co-hosts with the aforementioned Owen Sebring and others, as well as the Caitlin Clark effect, that great special they put together. And as Mitch mentioned, the Senior Day pregame show, all that available, as you see all of Mitch's links on the bottom of the screen, along with mine throughout this program. Be sure to check out all of Mitch's handiwork. If you missed it over the airwaves on television, be sure to check it out online. Mitch, I appreciate you agreeing to come back for a second segment, although when we get into it, I'm not sure you're going to want to stay. We got a lot. I say that jokingly. We got a lot to talk about with Hawkeye football. He is Mitch Fick. I am Dave O'Hara with Hawkeye. And don't forget our third segment. We'll close out with Michael Merrick, my production partner and Hawks broadcaster for Iowa Hawkeye men's basketball. We'll be back with the ever popular much, much more in just a few moments.
To have a strong finish, you need an excellent start. It's true on the track and also in the field. That's why Mershman Seeds works tirelessly to deliver cutting-edge technology year after year. Introducing Starting Line, Mershman Seeds' latest advancement in seed treatment, now providing added protection from white mold and sudden death syndrome all season. Ask for Starting Line seed treatment from Mershman Seeds, your friend in the field.
Welcome back to Hawkeye with me, Dave O'Hara. There's our buddy Mitch Fick. As I mentioned, Mitch, main news anchor at Iowa's News Now, Fox 28, CBS2. Mitch, of course, a sports guy through and through, a Hawkeye alum, a Cedar Rapids native. When he left us for a while to go to Michigan, cut his teeth on sports, as you're smiling with me, Mitch. So sports has never left you, but the great work you're doing on your Eye on the Hawks podcast with Owen Sebring and the rest of the crew there at Fox 28 and CBS2, Iowa's News Now, but also your pregame specials that you've done, especially for Senior Day. Let's you and I talk some Hawkeye football. Again, as we record this on Wednesday afternoon, March 20th, and folks, you're going to understand it. Why every week I give a timestamp when we record this. This week especially very important to timestamp as we record this. Mitch, you were at Pro Day on Monday, University of Iowa campus. Got to talk to some guys like Cooper DeJean, but as it was, it's about now 22 hours ago. Kadyn Proctor made the big splash of, hey, I'm going back to Alabama. I was a Hawkeye for almost 2 months, a couple of days shy of 2 months. Mitch, I can't believe I'm going to say this to you, but before we get to spring practice that started today at Iowa, spring drills and pro day, I got to have you talk about Kadyn Proctor to us for a few minutes, please.
You're thankful it happened March 19th and not like April 29th. And maybe that would even, be not as bad because you're through spring. And I think you're probably expecting some guys leave, maybe some guys come in, but at least didn't happen in mid-July or August or somewhere in there. It was so exciting when Kadyn decided to come back. And so, it was all the what ifs and what he could mean for this offense. And as we get ready for Tim Lester's first 15 practices, and then we get to see what happens at spring scrimmage on the 20th of April. But he's a 19-year-old kid, and boy, can't always think back to when we were 19 and how fleeting feelings can be and emotions. And people are talking a lot about what NIL could have been, and I'm not even going to begin to speculate on that. We don't know all the story, and we'll hear from Coach Ferentz next Tuesday on the 26th, I believe that would be for a press conference, and maybe we'll get a little more. But all I can really say about Kadyn Proctor is I don't say this facetiously, I hope he's finding what he's looking for. And I hope he finds it back in Tuscaloosa, having made friends and being part of an elite level program there, first under Nick Saban, now under Kalen DeBoer. And certainly he would have been under that back in Iowa City with Kirk Ferentz and playing on George Barnett's offensive line. But I just hope the kid finds happiness. He's 19 years old, and he's a wanted commodity, certainly, but he's also, again, a human being, and I hope I hope he finds his happiness there in Tuscaloosa and in the Crimson Tide.
I agree with you. Good to know now and not later. Let's move forward, Hawk fans. And so now, Mitch, let's talk about the pro day. Before we move forward with spring drills, I think it's important to take a look at our recent past. And big things upcoming for Cooper DeJean. He can get healthy, do some workouts, or at least we're pretty sure he's going to be a first-round draft pick. You had a chance to talk to him on Monday, as well as other recent former Hawks. Let's start there before we get to spring practice, please, Mitch.
Yeah, excited for Cooper. A guy who leaves Iowa not the way he wanted. Obviously, he's got an incredibly bright future, and what a story that started in Old Bolton. That's where the NFL journey will start too. That's where he's going to be. He won't be at the draft in Detroit. I think that's awesome. There's never been an NFL draft party, I imagine, in Old Iowa. So the fact that he gets to go back to his hometown, be with his family and friends, and he told me he's been watching YouTube videos of those beautiful moments you see on ESPN during the draft where you cut to the family room of somebody's house and they get to be there, not under the bright lights of whether it's, a Radio City Music Hall or wherever it may be. You just get to enjoy it in the comfort of your home. And what a beautiful sentiment it is, especially a kid from small town Iowa who's, as legendary a player as we've seen in the modern era at Iowa. And, when Phil Parker's comparing you to Niall Kinnick, you've done something special. And getting to see him up close and personal this year and having a way too good of a seat for some of his all-time plays, even if they didn't count, it was just a real special thing to be able to do that. And to get to talk to him, you get to know just a soft-spoken kid who's just trying to play ball and enjoy life. Yeah, I think everyone could not be more excited for him. We wish he could have gotten to walk off the field instead of crutch off the field at Kinnick Stadium one last time, but he was smiling and celebrating a Big Ten West title with his friends and his teammates. So you couldn't ask for much more if that's the way it had to be.
Yeah, Mitch, as we talk about Cooper DeJean, the other guy, Torrey Taylor, will probably be drafted and relatively high up. And for a punter, that's very unusual. So when I say probably drafted in the first 7 rounds and not be a free agent, doesn't happen often for punters or place kickers. But Torrey's going to be one of those guys. But the other guys that you talked to on Monday is the aforementioned Logan Lee and Nico Regaini and a few others, and I don't want to leave anybody, Noah Shannon. I mean, they're going to have opportunities as free agents if they don't get picked in the first 7 rounds. Give me your little peek over the hedges on what maybe you foresee upcoming with Tim Lester and the Hawkeyes and the Hawkeye offense, most importantly, Mitch.
I'm a little more familiar with Coach Lester just because I covered Western Michigan for the years before he got there. I covered PJ Flex teams there, and so I was very familiar with who Tim Lester was because he was a great quarterback for the Broncos too before he even showed up again as a coach. So I was following that program just out of curiosity because there were so many players that I remembered covering on those previous squads. So I knew when it was announced that he was going to be the new offensive coordinator, and people were like, "Who's Tim Lester? Who's this guy who was at Western Michigan and now he's an analyst for the Packers?" I'm like, those offenses moved the ball in Kalamazoo, and it was But yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic about what he can bring to the table. Obviously, it's Kirk's team. Kirk's likes a certain way to protect the football and be maybe a little more conservative when it comes to ball control and protecting the football. The ball is the program, as a lot of coaches say. I'm excited to see what he does, though. He loves pass catching tight ends. I've been told that by numerous people who are familiar with him. Well, guess what? He's at tight end U now, so I think he's going to have a lot of fun with that. And so we'll see what the spring brings. Cade McNamara is probably not going to be out there. He's still coming back from the knee, but you're going to have Deacon and Marco getting a lot of reps. Tommy Pulaski will get some third team stuff as well, but you're going to get to see a little bit of the install. You know, I don't know what it's going to look like 15 practices in once we get to that spring scrimmage on the 20th, but I think there will be a few plays if you're out there at Kinnick Stadium watching that where you go, okay, that looks a little different, and it's a good different.
He is Mitch Fick, folks, and he is the lead anchor, news anchor at Iowa's News Now, Fox 28, CBS2, but a heck of a sports guy, as you heard Mitch and I referenced earlier in this program, in this segment. Mitch, of course, Eye on the Hawks podcast as well. He co-hosts, so check all that out. Thank you very much, Mitch.
Thank you for everything, as always. Very kind of you.
Truly my pleasure. Folks, there he is, Mitch Fick. I'm Dave O'Hara with Hawkeye. We'll be back with more to close out the show with our buddy Michael Merrick, talking some Hawkeye men's basketball. Back with more in just a few moments.
Who do you trust to produce the best yield? A seed company that's chasing technology or a seed company that's writing a book on it? Mershman Seeds is a leader in technology. We're independent and family owned. Our sister company, MS Technologies, provides access to world-class traits and genetics. And our starting line seed treatment is second to none. Who can you trust with your yields? Mershman Seeds, your friend in the field.
Welcome back to Hawkeye with me, Dave O'Hara. There he is, our buddy Michael Merrick, and we're doing this show, as I mentioned earlier, remotely, so thanks again to Mitch Fick, all of us with the schedules and everything happening on the U of I campus with Hawkeye Athletics, and that smiling face you see is my production partner, Michael Merrick, but also broadcaster for Hawkeye men's basketball, or Hawkeye sports in general, but specifically Hawkeye men's basketball last night, Michael, as we record this on Wednesday afternoon, March 20th. I was a little, I don't know. I'm happy they made it to the postseason. The Hawkeye men's at 18-14 regular season played a 19-14 K-State team. But Michael, the few people that did show up at Carver Hawkeye last night, and you and your broadcasting team, what a game you got to see, man. A big Hawkeye victory. Peyton Sanford, a double-double, career-high 30 points. Ben Krikke, a double-double. So what a game you got to see. Let's talk about it, please.
Yeah, no, it was a fun NIT game, which, you know, with a lot of the narratives going on with the NIT recently, it's good to be able to say that this was a fun one. And I think from the tip, it was clear that Iowa was ready to play in this game, and they were ready to attack, and they were ready to perform. And you mentioned it. It was Peyton Sanford that led the way for the Hawkeyes. That 30 points, I mean, Dave, he shot his first five shots from the floor all went down, and there were 4 threes in that. He had 17 points with like 8 minutes into the game, and the only shot he missed was a free throw at the line. So, you know, Peyton Sanford was clearly, you know, a man on a mission last night.
Well, and as much as we want to talk about the transfer portal, and we know Dasonte Bowen entered the transfer portal today, keeping guys can be as difficult as getting guys. Let's talk about that a little bit, please.
Yeah, that's definitely, you know, something that every staff in the nation has to worry about now. And, you know, it's honestly a shame that they have to worry about that right now at a time where, you know, a lot of teams should be preparing for the biggest games of their entire season. In the past, this is kind of a low period where you can really hone in on your team, you know, focus on next year, you know, finish the tournament strong if that's the NIT or the NCAA tournament, and really try to find what foundation you can have going into the summer. Well, now, you know, if you're in the tournament, you still might be losing guys that, you know, you kind of had a plan for this upcoming year, or at least didn't expect to have to lose. So you're not only are people coming out, you're going to try to bring people in. So I think we're going to see these off seasons have to be way more important and structural than we've ever seen before, because there's so many moving parts now that, you know, Iowa only has 2 guards on their roster for next season now. Like, technically, with Tony having a 5th year available, it's just Brock and Josh right now for this Iowa team, with Bowen entering the portal.
I think we are still in the wild, wild west when it comes to NIL and the transfer portal. And as a newer person in the media and still finishing college and getting into the world, you're really seeing it all develop right in front of you. What a time to be getting into this.
Yeah, it's definitely a crazy perspective to have as well. But now what we're seeing is kind of too far in the other direction in some aspect. I love what the Swarm does and the ability that they have to, compensate athletes for going to charitable events, for these athletes to be more engraved in the community. And I think we've seen the NIL only benefit Iowa City specifically. I'll just stay there because that's what I'm able to see. But, Tyler Linderbaum donating to the Children's Hospital, all the work that Caitlin Clark has done in the past, Tori Taylor with Count the Kicks. A lot of the Iowa athletes are using this foundation to, go to other causes and great things. And that's why NIL is great. But sadly, there's two sides to every coin, Dave. And what's going on with Kadyn Proctor right now in Iowa? It's not just an Iowa problem. This is probably going to be something that happens at other places. It's a shame to see. That's the problem with the transfer portal and NIL. It's great for player movement, player empowerment, which is something that all of these athletes and, young adults have grown up with. We've seen LeBron James and Kevin Durant, go do what's best for them. And, you want to be like your idols when you grow up. And a lot of players were idolizing that. And right now, it seems like the player empowerment, or at least the player movement and the funding of it, has seemed to have swung a little bit too much.
Well stated by you, Michael. And I love your perspective because, again, we're all at different ages and stages of our life and what we know and our life experience and what we see. And you're on campus there in Iowa City amongst everybody. And it is interesting to hear what you have to say. But, Michael, going into next year, for the experience they had this year, all things being considered, they can keep who they have and make some additions in the portal or recruiting. We've seen great classes coming in. Great recruits coming in this class for 2024, 2025. I think the cupboard looks relatively full, and I know a lot of fans are complaining about the Fran fade in March again. Here we are. We didn't make it. I get all that. But if you look at it realistically, as you and I did in October, November, this season played out, I think, even better than most had anticipated. And I know the expectation should be higher, but it is what it is, Michael, and I can't feel bad about that.
No, and one thing that a lot of Hawkeye fans need to realize, there's a list that happens specifically in March about every year of the teams and the longest consecutive trips to the NCAA tournament. And you'll see Kansas right at the top, and then Gonzaga. And then after that, the list really starts to just become 5 appearances in a row, 6, 4. And that's where Iowa was at for a while before missing this year, making the NCAA tournament every season, unless you are the Kansas Jayhawks or, North Carolina, who missed it.
Or Michigan State.
Yeah, or Michigan State, who can always get in no matter what the record is, it seems like. But, outside of those blue blood programs, teams don't make the NCAA tournament every single year. You have years where you barely miss it. You were on the bubble, and then you have to go to the NIT. And that's okay. That is the way that college sports work. Failure and success isn't just determined by the postseason. Look at what has been brought into the program and look at what has been taken out of the program. You cannot argue that Fran McCaffery has not done more with less than almost any other coach in the country when you look at how their recruiting lines up versus where they always end up ranking nationally and having these, players perform. Luka Garza was definitely not expected to be a unanimous National Player of the Year and a near back-to-back National Player of the Year. And Keegan Murray definitely wasn't expected to be, the 4th overall pick in the draft when he came to Iowa. A lot of Hawkeye fans were even upset that the Murray twins were, the big commitment for the Hawkeyes since they had to go take, that one boarding year school. But outside of that, Fran McCaffery has done so much for this Iowa team.
Well, to be sure, Michael, everybody, the fans, some will complain that, they're never where they're supposed to be. They're below the bar. And I'm sure Fran would agree with that. He's not where he wants to be right now with this team's success. He was hoping for much more. But we're moving forward, doing the best they can. And I agree with you. I think next year, a few moves here and there, this could really be a team we're talking about. My friend, it's always great to catch up with you. Folks, he is Michael Merrick, my production partner, but also broadcaster for Iowa Hawkeyes Athletics. Michael, I look forward to talking with you again soon, but my goodness, what a show with you and Mitch Fick today. We've covered it all as much as we can have time for. with Hawkeye Athletics, specifically Bluter's Bunch, Hawkeye Football, and Hawkeye Men's Basketball. My friend, thank you so much, Michael.
Thank you so much, Dave.
Truly my pleasure. For Michael Merrick, Mitch Fick, to you, the viewers, my production partner and on-air guest today, Michael Merrick, and to you again, the viewers. For Hawkeye, I'm Dave O'Hara. That's all from us. Thanks to all of you. And as always, thanks for staying tuned at the end of the program for these rolling credits to give our advertisers and sponsors the attention and credit they so richly deserve. And as always, to our aforementioned guests and to you, the viewers. That's all from us at Hawkeye. Thanks to all of you.